This week on Another Thing, universal pre-K. Everybody agrees it would be a great thing for children, so then why is it so controversial? And at what age should you leave your child home alone? 6, 16? It's a question that plagues every parent. And my commentary this week is on President Obama and Iran, an unlikely duo now tied together in history. But first, Pennsylvania, New York, Delaware, and New Jersey are all considering universal pre-K, the requirement that every child should start school before kindergarten. Ellen Kolodziej looks at the cost and the benefits of universal pre-K. Ellen.
Universal pre-K started in Georgia back in 1995, but 20 years later, just a handful of states have followed that lead. But in New York City, Mayor de Blasio has been fighting for universal pre-K, and starting this September, all 4-year-olds will have access to free, full-day pre-kindergarten in that city. And one group here in Pennsylvania is fighting for the same thing.
The brain grows more in those first 5 years than at any other point. And so if we delay a high-quality educational setting, we're losing a lot of ground. And for kids who are growing up in families where they don't have a lot of access to books and to other kinds of supports and rich experiences, this really contributes to the achievement gap. So if you start school behind, it's very hard to catch up.
Sharon Easterling is the executive director of the Delaware Valley Association for the Education of Young Children. She's on a mission to make sure all kids go to preschool. She's heard all the criticism, including where's the money coming from and why not make all-day kindergarten available before we worry about pre-K like they did in Minnesota. But she says pay now or pay later.
It costs almost $40,000 a year to incarcerate someone. And we know we have a real problem in this country with having way too many people in prison. If we could cut that rate significantly, we could save so much money, and how much better to spend it on the front end, right? We also know good preschool cuts the need for special education by 2/3. We could save, in the city of Philadelphia alone, we could save between $5 and $6 million a year for each grade.
A spokesperson for the Department of Education says Governor Tom Wolf wants to invest $120 million in pre-K programs this year, and he also wants to spend $2 billion over the next 4 years. But he could face a fight on that budget in Harrisburg.
For sure, it's going to be a fight, right? But I believe the question about pre-K is not if it will happen, but when it will happen. It is a compelling idea. It's been proven to have enormous beneficial effects. And as I said, eventually we'll catch up with the rest of the world, and we'll do the right thing for families and children.
So advocates for universal pre-K here in Pennsylvania are confident that some funding will pass this year. And they say any extra money is a step in the right direction. Reporting for Another Thing, I'm Ellen Kolodziej.
All right, thank you, Ellen. Now to discuss universal pre-K more and possibly have a debate is Curt Macysyn, who is the executive director of the New Jersey Child Care Association, and also Sam Crane, who is a representative of Pre-K Our Way. Thank you both for being here. I think when we talk about this, and first I should point out that all 4 states that are serviced by this show, Delaware, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and New York, in some ways either have or are considering universal pre-K. And in every state, it has been somewhat controversial, maybe less so in Delaware, but certainly in Pennsylvania and in New Jersey and in New York. And I think the debate is, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, and Sam, I'll start with you, the debate seems to be the benefit to the children versus the cost. Fair?
I think that is a debate, except that the debate on the benefit of pre-K is really over when you look at it in terms of the long-term research. In New Jersey, we've had pre-K in 31 districts. And the graduates of that pre-K are now in the 5th grade, and they are testing higher than their peers. They are about 3/4 of a year ahead of their peers in school, and it works. And you can tell it works because every state, not just in our region, but around the country, is looking at this as the next big investment to improve K through 12.
Here's the thing. I don't think anybody argues with you on that.
Right.
I'm not certain that anybody says there isn't a benefit to start educating kids younger. It's whether taxpayers should have to pay for it. That's the debate, right?
Absolutely. I'm not going to refute anything that Sam said. In fact, the private community providers have been providing the service in the community for decades now, over 30 years. So the private providers have evolved, they've adapted, and now we're ready to move into the next realm, and that's to work with the state, create standards, and hopefully partner continue to provide this service.
But you would have to be able to afford a private provider, right? I mean, so you're necessarily, if you're saying that's the best way, aren't you necessarily leaving some people out?
Well, no, because as it is now, with the Abbott court decision, all those high-risk students in Abbott districts are currently getting state-funded pre-K right now.
And is that fair?
No. There are kids who need pre-K beyond the Abbott districts. And there is a compelling need across the state in suburban and rural districts where you have poverty and where you have kids that are falling behind. Because long term, we can't leave one child behind. So let's talk about the cost. One of the advantages of pre-K is in the special education costs. That is a burden to K through 12. You talk to any superintendent, they wrestle with special education. One of the things by starting at 3 is that you start to diagnose those kids at 3 with hearing problems, speech problems, and whatever, and you take care of it in pre-K setting early on when you can have a big impact, and then when they get into school, they don't have to deal with it.
So why not just provide it for them?
But I'm not debating that issue. That's exactly how we open the program. The debate here is in areas where parents can afford to send their children to preschool, is the state going to pick up the cost of providing pre-K for those students?
Well, they do in some states. As you pointed out, there are some states across the country that are doing this.
And I would challenge anyone who suggests that there aren't students in places like Freehold, New Jersey, or places like Egg Harbor Township, or Clifton, New Jersey. These are communities that have some wealth, but they also have a lot of middle class and poorer working class families that their kids could benefit from this. And the debate, I think a lot of times gets into, well, is the state going to pay for it? Absolutely, in those 90 districts. In fact, there's a state law in existence that says that we will expand the Abbott program to 90 more districts, and it was supposed to be implemented by the last school year.
Yeah, but universal pre-K is something different than what you're talking about. Universal pre-K would then necessarily have to be for everyone, and with the state, Pennsylvania's got huge problems. The Philadelphia School District is barely staying alive. New York's got huge problems. New Jersey has a pension problem. All these states are dealing with deficits, and when you throw something like this into the middle of it, wouldn't the cost outweigh the benefit?
The pension system is already underwater. So in theory, now you're talking about extending pensions and benefits to another cadre of teachers in the pre-K system.
Oh, now you brought up something else which I wanted to get to. Go ahead, I'll let you answer that first, but then I'll go.
I think it's a question of political will.
It's a question of
money.
money.
It's not a budget. No, it's not a question of budget. It's a question of political will. And let me take you beyond our region. Texas.
Right to work.
No.
Yes.
No.
Texas, right to work. Georgia, right to work. Alabama, right to work. The states you're about to tell me are all right to work states.
But they're expanding their pre-K. And the reason they're doing it is this isn't about right to work or about budget challenges or anything else. What they see this as is the key investment to improve K through 12.
But they can do it because it costs less for them. Is that not the case?
In Abbott districts, the cost of pre-K is between $13,000 and $14,000 per student. Now you extrapolate that and take the state as a whole, you're talking about real dollars. And I respect what Sam's saying, and in fact, I don't disagree with it. What we're doing, though, is throwing the baby out with the bathwater. We've had private community providers who've done this, who've made investments in curriculum, who are providing early learning centers for pre-K children. And now what we're saying is, we don't need you any longer. The fact of the matter is, we've been doing it longer. We've been doing it with a level of expertise and experience, and the school districts the establishments, the school districts, are Johnny-come-latelys to this party.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Curt Macysyn, who is the Executive Director of New Jersey Child Care Association, and also Sam Crane, who is a representative from Pre-K Our Way. This is a debate that's going to continue in Trenton, in Albany, in Harrisburg, in Philadelphia, and in Dover. So I really appreciate you being here. And please come back, especially as the bills and the legislation starts to go a little bit further. When we come back, we're going to keep talking about kids. When is the appropriate age to leave your child at home? There may be a new law about that coming to your state when Another Thing returns.